We have learned a lot by doing and implementing a number of projects and programs, but one good thing we have done is we have never made a mistake. We have not relied on outside intervention. We have not depended on external forces to come and implement programs. That's been the struggle. I mean, they would come and tell you, oh, they would like to put wells here and there. They would like to implement charity programs. They would like to run your hospitals. They would like to do your programs on behalf of you. And that's where many who were supposed to have achieved a lot in the Millennium Development Goals are now more, they are poorer now.
You mean the aid is not an aid?
Not at all. Anyone who takes aid is crippled. And aid is meant to cripple people. So, do we agree or disagree is another issue. And governments in Africa and elsewhere are not allowed to write their own programs. And when it comes to implementing programs, it deprives you of building institutions and the capacity to implement your programs. You want to build a road, you want to build a school, you want to provide clean water, you want to provide electricity to the communities everywhere. You have to be able to know it. You may not have the capacity, technical, technological, or even financial resources, but you have to build this capacity. Unless you do it on your own, someone else does it. And when you're talking about, say, food security, someone comes and provides you with aid, and then you develop this habit. Every year it's aid, every year it's aid coming. I mean, it's intentionally or without any intention meant to cripple communities and government. And you have substitutes for government. It's NGOs, it's charities, it's UN agencies, it's other agencies, consultants who are paid
Fortunes.
Anyway, that makes a big problem. So we said we need to write our own program in the first place. We need to articulate on the projects we write, and we need to have a strategy, a comprehensive strategy. And we need to have detailed plans on how we implement those programs. We need to have budgetary issues addressed. We need to have scheduling of different programs. Unless we do that on our own, we can't possibly imagine that we are achieving any of the goals, millennium or non-millennium. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, was quite an experience for us. The lessons we have learned are assets for us, even though we need to go a long way. We need to mobilize resources. We need to put in place an infrastructure. We need to develop institutional capacity. We need to educate our people. We need to train our young to be able to work and implement those programs so that we change the quality of life. That never happens in the real world. In the real world, we know now, because those who control the resources, those who have the muscles to impose their own will, are somewhere else, and they have their own interests. We, on the other hand, have our interests. So it's up to you to make a choice. Do you go with them or do you go your own way? Africa can produce its own food and go more. Why aren't we able to do that? Why haven't we been successful in implementing programs that secure food for our own people? Because that's a priority. Because we are talking about poverty, famine, disease, epidemics here and there, sometimes natural catastrophes. How do we design programs? Now, if you have a long coast like what we have, then you need to develop fisheries, because that's a resource. You need to develop the capacity, but not for, we live in a globalizing world, because you have to interact, you have to sell and buy. It's not self-sufficiency all the time. When you talk about self-sufficiency, they will demonize it as if it means isolation. It's not isolation. You have to be self-sufficient for the short or medium term. It's a transitional program, but then again, you have to identify your comparative advantage. What are my comparative advantages? Do I have agriculture? Do I have enough water? Do I have mineral resources? You need to think least when it comes to mineral resources. You have to be able to exactly know what your comparative advantages are. Your location could be a comparative advantage, and you have to develop the services industry, provide services, shipping, transportation, air, land. You need to think that, because you have to know your comparative advantage. Then you have to talk about industry and manufacturing. It's not easy. This is a very stiff area where you need to compete with giants. You have to produce something. If you're talking about cotton production, yes, you may produce cotton. If you're talking about textile, okay, you can do that. You can't go for garments, because garments require so many things. You have to go and compete in markets. That's where, even in agriculture, you have to talk about food crops and cash crops. You can produce cotton, oil seeds, sugar, and other horticultural programs for export. That will generate a lot of resource for you, but you need to have a balanced, comprehensive program that takes stock of your comparative advantage in a number of sectors, and you have to design programs for those particular sectors and come to work on that. That's where the problem comes. When you have someone who thinks you are a backyard, you do this or you do that. A collective change. So I would say that's a very natural thing for human beings. When those who control power control these resources, local agents or even conglomerates from outside, then the gap widens and poverty becomes very prevalent. You don't know how to use this resource, then you're going to a very dangerous track. That's where we need to prioritize other things. These reserves will not live for so many generations to come. Even those who brag about endless resources have no endless resources. There is an end at one point in time, and this is a resource that is eligible for an ownership that may take 3-4 generations to come. Now, when you put in place an infrastructure, when you emphasize on sustainable sectors, agriculture is a sustainable sector. Natural disasters may come, but what you do in implementing agricultural programs and putting in place agricultural infrastructure makes that sector sustainable. And because it's a strategic commodity, a strategic program for communities, you need to focus on that. If you forgo agriculture because you have gold, then you go into trouble. If you forgo other comparative advantage that you have because you have gold, then you make a big mistake. That's where you need to be careful, and that's where we think, yes, we have it, but we don't even want to exaggerate that this could solve all problems. What solves the problems is what we do in terms of the goals we identify, and once we achieve those goals, a combination of so many sustainable things. Fishing will live with us for generations to come. We need to put in place facilities for processing fish, good capacity for fishing, train people to do the job, have markets, continually provide markets, and buy.
To eat fish and cook
Yeah,
it?
for local markets, it's everything. It has to be there. Food crops, wheat, barley, corn, and others will have to be available. Livestock is here. If we develop agriculture, we have livestock, enough for us and for export. We need to develop these sustainable resources and sectors so that we can take advantage of mineral resource. Otherwise, focusing on gold is a big mistake. Gold glitters, but it blinds people also. Why are people greedy? Can you find an explanation for that? Why does someone want to take your resources unjustly? It's no secret that they want to dominate the world. It's no secret that they control resources. Even if we're talking about special interests, they may have their allies, they may have their networks globally, but they are the main stakeholders or the majority stakeholders in what we call special interest. Oil industry, manufacturing, technology, even the control of our minds, media, culture, learning institutions. Somehow they have come to control and they believe they can control the world. It's a big mistake. Yes, during the Cold War, there was a bipolar world. There was competition between the former Soviet Union and the United States as superpowers. We have seen how that fight has emerged into a situation. That era ended early 90s, probably 20 years ago. And these special interest groups have developed a very wrong and distorted notion that now they are the only superpower. They have to control the resources of the world for the coming 2-3 generations and maybe beyond, because no one can compete with them, and they cannot allow anyone to compete with them. They can't allow any power to rise to be their equal in terms of the military capability. No one is allowed to be their equal in terms of controlling technology, the latest technology. They have to influence major resources of the world, and they have to have the means for doing that. The previous issues we raised about special interests controlling the media, conglomerates, controlling regional and international institutions, including financial institutions, governing or controlling the world by proxy, by agents. This is not my analysis. This is a program for these people. This is their global program. They want to control the world. Come to Africa, they will tell you they will have anchors, south, west, east, and north. And they have to have agents. That was what I mentioned earlier about the Nixon doctrine.
Yes.
Because the United States cannot overstretch, it has to control areas by agents. And they have to identify and select agents. It's not hostility towards Eritrea. This is a very sick mentality, an intolerant mentality of domination and control. And whenever people are not conforming to their wishes and their priority, then you would be targeted. But it's not an isolated case. It's not Eritrea alone. We are part of a very sensitive region.
Yes.
We have so many conflicts because of their policies. It's Afghanistan, it's Pakistan, it's Iraq, it's the Middle East in general, it's the Horn of Africa, the Red Sea. This is an area designated for their control and domination.
Yes, we will talk about that.
We unfortunately, we happen to be in this geography. Globalization may have different meanings, but globalization is a result of the transformation that has taken place during the 20th century. Now we are in the 21st century. I say there is a law that governs communities. When individuals came together in primitive communities, there has to be a rule that is acceptable for everyone. They come together to live together, to mobilize resources collectively and achieve collective goals. This was there even when the Bible was written and when the Quran was written. People talked about poor and wealthy, poor and rich. And the status quo of any community at one particular historical moment is not acceptable to allow a minority grab on the resources of the majority and make the poor poorer while they accumulate wealth at the expense of the majority. This has been the struggle of communities since, I don't know, millennia. Okay? This is the rule of the game. We are not inventing anything. You don't invent anything. If you have a community in the 21st century, you cannot allow a minority coming and grabbing the opportunity of others and the resource of others and depriving others of the opportunity to change their quality of life. It's as simple as that. You can talk about ideologies, you can talk about the philosophy behind these ideologies, but it's a rule. Human beings will have to live together fairly, share resources equitably. There has to be a rule that governs their relationship. There has to be a rule on how they produce. There has to be a rule of the game on how they distribute wealth. And there has to be a rule of the game on how they distribute or how they consume wealth. It's as simple as that. You want to talk about a community at a particular historical moment, then you have to ask these very simple questions. These are not the product of the 20th century or even the 19th century when industrialization came, when communities were transformed. We have now the information age. We can talk about globalization, but the same question remains all along. And the rules are always the same. Even in a highly industrialized community or society or nation, you have to ask these very simple rules. Who makes wealth? Who creates wealth? And how do people share wealth created by the majority? And do they share wealth fairly and equitably? And that's where the problem comes. Wars are a result of the mismanagement of these basic rules or adoption of these basic rules. And I say globalization now has brought us to a new era, but the rules have not changed. We're talking about minorities, small, special interests are creating havoc for everybody else. Greed is the motivation, but ultimately it's control of resources. To control the resources, you have to dominate. Okay? And domination will have to come by all Machiavellian tactics. This is Machiavellian. It's to achieve your goals, do whatever you like, and the end justifies the means. These are the means for achieving the goals. So you can cite examples. It's not just theories or concepts within a package of means used by these special interests to control and dominate the world. That's not, it's very transparent. How do they do it in each and every case? And sometimes people will say, oh, individual countries. There are no individual countries in their own eyes. This has become a reality because of history. You have this nation, that nation, how many countries in Africa, how many countries in Asia. But for them, this does not exist. They have areas of influence. Areas of influence are identified one, their economic resource, any kind of resource. Second, their strategic position. Whether they have a resource or not doesn't matter, as long as they are part of the geography, and that becomes the problem. And third is the communities who are supposed to be sovereign, who are supposed to be free, will have to be enslaved. It's a global enslavement. To achieve the goals of domination and control of resources, how do you enslave people? You have to have an agent to do that. They will try every means. It's from luring anyone into the trap, or even forcing someone, or eliminating. It goes from buying or trying to compromise, win, use. If that is not possible, it can go to the extent